How are you, Lynette?
Hi, Mark.
Hi.
I have my glasses off. I couldn't even see where to unmute myself. I, uh, I hate how, as every year passes, I get more and more dependent on my glasses. Where are my other ones? Be right back. I gotta find my other glasses. That's better. These are lighter.
So I just so the streaming is working. I just checked that. I had to shut it off because I get the audio echo from that
Oh,
back in. There's about a 15-second delay or so on it. So when I said hi to you 15 seconds later, I heard myself say hi to you again over the live stream. So not a good thing. But I know it's working, so
better than nothing.
yeah. So that presentation that I did, that I put together on breaking down the SU budget, I wasn't
right. Yeah.
planning to do that tonight, but I have it in my back pocket. If somebody asks a question, if somebody says something like, what do you mean there's a, $2 million assessment from the SU, I can pop that baby up and walk through parts of it and explain it.
That's good. That's usually one of the bones of contention is
Yep.
the
Yeah, and if it gets, if it really gets gnarly, I mean, it's probably 10 minutes, 15 minutes to walk through that. So we kind of play that by ear.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
I did get the enrollment stuff in. I did put it in the presentation. The stuff that I got from Liz and the other principals this week. So that's it's in the presentation. Probably get some questions about the staff to student ratio because Waterford's going to say that, it's not fair that Barnet staff student ratio is lower.
Not only that, but I think there always is a question of the general public.
Mm-hmm.
Are we making adjustments for staff as our student population continues to go down every year? So I think they always want to see that. Whether or not they remember what it was 2 years ago or not, I have no idea. But
yeah, well, we certainly did that last year, but the position of our position, the administration's position, and the board supported it was that this is not the year to be cutting the staff.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to have some serious conversations next year if we don't see the equalized pupils go back up. So,
absolutely.
We're down 24 students.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big hit on the tax rate, and it's the reason that you're over the excess penalty threshold.
And it's been going down almost that much every year. So it's,
yeah, I don't remember the exact number last year. It might have dropped 14 or 15, and
right.
Yeah, no, it's not trending in the right direction. So that's for sure.
Not for maintaining or increasing staff. That's for sure.
Right. So I don't know. I hope we don't. I hope this doesn't turn into a debate tonight about that.
No, and my plan is, if it's brought up, which it may, I'm going to acknowledge it and say that we can look at it for next year. That doesn't mean we're going to do it next year, but we can acknowledge it and say that it's something that we'll look at when we're writing our goals for next year as far as what are we looking for.
Right.
But it's not something we're going to change tonight. So,
right.
And the more we can not engage with that attempt, the better.
Yeah. Well, I think you're doing. I think it's not reflected on this agenda, but I think for the meeting on Monday, I think you're doing a good thing, kind of putting a stake in the ground around what public comment is. Um, and then, for tonight, I guess if you want to, you can just say, we're taking it, we're hearing your comment, and we'll think about what we're going to do with it.
Right, because tonight truly is more of a public meeting. It's for them to get some answers and ask questions and understand. That doesn't mean that we're going to add things back in at this point. It just means they can understand what the budget is right now, and we can write down what their ideas are. We'll see.
Okay, we will.
I can never tell what Waterford's going to bring to the table, so
I know.
I've given up guessing.
So the Cabot budget went down.
I saw that in the paper today. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a couple different thoughts about that. The Cabot mailed ballots to all of the active registered voters. There's a block of voters in Cabot that always vote no on the budget, and it runs around 200 or 210 people. There's also a block of voters that always vote yes on the budget.
Yeah.
We typically get, we've in the past few years we've been getting 500 to 550 ballots cast on town meeting day, and we only got about 400 back this time.
Yeah, I saw that. It was less.
And the board members that have been talking around town, they've been saying, talking to people, and they say, "Oh, geez, I forgot to send my ballot in," and these are people that support the school. So that block, we basically, if that theory is right, we made it easy for that block to vote no, and they probably all voted no, and we had people that didn't vote when they should have. So I don't know what we're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah, my dad was one of those that was always outspoken at the board meetings and saying that we got to keep things in line. However, whenever it came time to vote, he always voted yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's good. Yeah. That's good public commentary. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I just learned so we've got a new board member voted in Cabot this week, and somebody told me today that he's argued against the school budget because he doesn't think the school spends enough.
Well, there you go.
So that's going to be interesting.
Is that not Irene's husband?
Yeah, Frank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, I thought so.
Okay. I haven't met him. He was online in one of our meetings. I don't know him. I don't know him from a hill of beans. So.
Oh, very nice guy. He's a beekeeper, passionate about his bees. Very nice guy. Yep.
Right now we've got. I'm going to let Sue in.
Sure. Oh, did you see that Sue is running again this year? Thankfully, Sue.
No, I didn't.
Let's see when she actually gets to talking again. Good evening, Sue.
Hi, Lynette.
Hi.
I was so excited. I think I saw your name on the Barnett ballot.
It was.
You
magically appeared.
I'm so happy. Thank you so much.
I'll do one more term, man.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Oh, there's Louise.
No problem. No problem.
So yeah, Mark, I signed up to be a sub because Carson's almost done his school year, and so last night I get a call at 9:30 at night from Cabot about their water main. I guess now that I'm on the sub list, I'm getting the notification.
Oh, I don't know why you would have gotten it. I just got the approval today.
Oh, I had to peel myself off the ceiling.
Yeah, so I don't know how that happened, but anyway, yeah.
I'm not used to getting phone calls that late at night.
Okay.
Oh, too funny.
All right, I'm going to start letting people in because we got 5 or 6 people piled up in the waiting room.
Sounds great. It's 5 of.
Okay. Hey, Lynette, if I make you a co-host when we get into presentation, can you just keep an eye on the waiting room? Make sure if somebody comes in when I'm presenting that I don't miss them.
I have no idea how to do that, but I can give it a try. I don't know if Heather might be a better person if she comes on.
Okay, I'll ask her to do it. It's not that hard, but I'll ask her.
I wouldn't even know where to find it.
Well, if you open up your participants window, they show up as being in the waiting room.
I see participants. Oh, we can try it. Sure.
Okay.
Hey, James.
Hello.
Hey, Jess.
Hi.
People are popping up left and right here. Hey, Liz.
Hi, Lynette.
Good evening, Jen.
Hey, everybody. Hi, Lynette.
Hi, Heather. I see you here now, too. Oh, hi, Miriam.
Moving in and out during inspections. We noticed that they were other people living there. It was just my brother and I. We can't stop helping people because of that situation. I just have somebody look it over before you actually get into a contract like that. We've never had any issues except for this one. Because they do actually take your money and no money goes towards the purchase of.
So, Mark, I'm experimenting here with that participants window that you were asking about.
Yeah.
I see a list of people, and how will I know if they need to be let in?
They're all in right now. So the next time somebody goes into the waiting room, it'll pop up as a separate list at the top. It'll say
okay.
waiting. It'll say waiting room or in waiting room.
All right.
And then there's a button to the right that says admit. Or if there's a bunch of them, there's a button that says admit all. You can do it that way too.
I'll wait and see. All right. Well, my computer is saying 6 o'clock. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Caledonia Cooperative School District informational meeting for next year's budget. I'm Lynette Farnham. I'm the CCSD board chair. Welcome. Mark, I saw it and I admitted Roger
There you
Fox.
go.
Bingo. I'm good.
Okay, you know how to do it.
Now I do. Thank you.
Okay.
Lynette, may I ask the person that is listed as iPad to identify themselves?
Absolutely. Let's see, more.
Mona Marcel.
Thank you, Mona.
Gets rid of a restriction on mixing groups of students. That can happen as long as the school keeps attendance records.
Heather, what was it? Who was that again?
What will work for them?
We need to,
She just put her name on, Mark.
Okay.
All right, so this meeting, I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's actually 6:02 now that we've figured out how to run a few things. Thank you for your patience with me. Pretty simple agenda tonight. There's going to be a presentation on the year we've had and the fiscal year 22 budget that we're submitting. And then we'll take questions. We're not going to get into a whole lot of debate because this isn't quite the place for it, but we'll try to answer your questions as we can. And go from there. All right, Mark?
Well, we're actually, I wanted to start let the principals start and have them go through the year in review and talk about what's been happening and what they're looking forward to next year.
Sounds great. All right, Louisa.
Thank you.
Here I am.
You can go.
Thank you. We will begin reviewing a little bit from March of last year, where we had a unique and distinctive offering of both challenges and rewards. Our coordination with families and staff in the development and delivery of instruction of online methods, as well as paper and pencil and project-based learning, certainly had a steep learning curve for everyone involved. We were supported also through professional development by our CCSU curriculum and technology directors, and staff from each of the 3 schools sought additional professional development in the delivery of online learning opportunities for students. During the summer months, teams of teachers continued professional development opportunities through the Summer Best Institute. We focused on social emotional learning opportunities. We explored implicit bias for compassionate understanding of all students. The initial social emotional learning product developed by teachers at the Best Institute ultimately led to a springboard of refinement of some opportunities that became an integral component of the morning meetings throughout our supervisory union. We also address specific requirements for social distancing, masking, and the use, of course, of hand sanitizer, bus protocols, and implemented our own fall opening structures for each of the 3 schools. Barnett School offered students pre-K through 6 a choice between full remote learning or on-campus learning Monday through Friday from 8 to 1:30. And grades 7 and 8 were offered a hybrid learning model due to the large class sizes. This created a schedule of Monday and Thursday and a B schedule of Tuesday and Friday with no in-person learning on Wednesday to allow for extra sanitation. In Walden School, we offered students in grades pre-K in-person learning 5 days a week. Grades K through 8, we offered in-person learning 5 days a week, 8 to 2. And the families also had opportunity to access remote learning 5 days per week. Waterford School offered 3 options: full day in-person learning 5 days per week, full-time remote learning with instruction by a Waterford or CCSU teacher, or enrollment in Vermont Agency of Education Home Study Program. Classrooms and recess supplies were carefully selected and managed. Lessons were created to allow more frequent use of the outdoors as weather permitted. Our Caledonia Cooperative School District goals for the 2020-2021 year include academics, in which we are striving for all schools to make either 1-year progress in ELA or math, or meet and exceed individual learning goals. Teams of teachers triangulate and analyze data to inform decisions and instructional practices. This includes tailoring professional development opportunities and program practices to each school based upon student needs. And each of our 3 schools work to refine our multi-tiered system of support model. Also at Barnett School, professional learning committees were utilized to organize and develop and implement Fountas and Pinnell literacy components. Students in grades 3 through 8 will become familiar with the proper use of technology and suggested websites for research projects, properly citing sources. Walden School focused additionally on intervention for literacy and math, as well as specific professional development in both math and literacy, specific to executive functioning. Waterford School also focused on MTSS models and creating referral system processes to accurately reflect data and goals. Chris, would you like to take the next focus on safe and healthy schools?
Sure. Let me read it. So for our safe and healthy schools, we are working to improve our MTSS support. And I know that Barnett and Walden use positive behavior intervention systems. In the fall, we are working to improve our sanitation practices to prevent the spreading of COVID. We spent a lot of time. Safe and healthy schools this year had a very real meaning when we opened during the pandemic. So safe and healthy really focused a lot on sanitation practices, making sure our process for keeping the school clean and the classroom safe had real implications for the health of our students and our school communities. We spent a lot of time looking at what processes would work with each individual school. This year, our drills for emergency fire drills have been curtailed quite a bit because of the The way the drills typically work is groups of cohorts typically would mix trying to get out of the school. And so the state basically told us that we had to do a few formal drills, and the rest of the drills that we had to do this year were actually instructional drills within the classrooms. And so we were in a position this year where we really had to think about safe and healthy schools as it related to our pandemic situation. And that took a lot of focus, energy on all of our parts. And that's it.
Do you want me to address the last part and then I can talk about ongoing projects for the end of the year and looking forward to the year ahead?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Let me go back to our report. All the schools, when we, in the summer, we were planning for this year, we all identified the need for professional development in the areas of science and GSS, STEAM curricula, global studies alignment, and social emotional learning. We have provided professional development for our teachers in empowering them for online learning. We created landing platforms for each teacher, and we provided a lot of resources, and I need to thank Scott Marcy and Jessica Monahan for all the resources provided to the teachers to implement those landing pages. We continued with a mentoring program for new teachers, and it's going very well, and we look forward to continuing assisting them as needed. And in terms of referring to the support we got from the communities, all our communities have been very supportive of all the changes and all the challenges. Has not been easy for the parents to accept all the different modalities and the changes, and sometimes we had to quickly ask them to keep the students at home for a week or two, and they have been instrumental for the success of this year. So all in all, we don't challenges this year as almost, is gone. We're looking forward to the end of it, and the learning continued again with different modalities. Kids stayed mostly with their cohorts. We were serving meals into the classrooms. We limited the use of the gymnasium. The music program was also limited, but then there were some of the restrictions were lifted, so we were able to do a little more in the music program and some use of the gymnasium. And then when the weather permitted it, we were doing a lot with the outdoors and so forth. We continue to address social emotional learning and social emotional needs of our students in many different capacities. Our guidance counselors have been fantastic, and all the staff also helped out in supporting our children and staff when they needed. We're looking at the end of the year activities, so we are having meetings to discuss how we want to have the graduation this year. If we still need to deal with some of the restrictions, we are looking at some new things are coming through from the state. But as for now, we are having meetings about end of the year activities, graduation. Barnett is looking at the driving model possibly for graduation. And then we are also looking at this time at some teachers retiring, and there will be some hiring done in the summer. And looking forward to the year ahead, our goal is to bring all the students back, to go back to some sort of normality, whatever normal is now anymore, resume regular schedule, have the kids back in person full time, go back to the use of the gymnasiums, the kitchens. And so we look forward to the light at the end of the tunnel. And then we are also looking at professional development for next year and curriculum alignment.
Thank you very much
Yeah.
to all three of you. It's quite the review.
It's been a busy year, Lynette, and we're not done yet. So, I know this is always on the mind of the principals, but I think, most of the credit for how well things have gone go to the staff at the rest of the staff at the school, the teachers, support staff, everybody that's working with the kids. I know that there's a lot of almost on a daily basis jumping around, shifting around. I saw one of the CCSD teachers today and was telling me that there were how they had to scramble the other day because there were a number of teachers that were out with side effects from recent vaccinations, and they were short-staffed, and they figured out how to keep the school open. And I think that's kind of been the model this year is, where are the gaps, where are the holes, what do we do to fill it? And I would never say that that's been easy, but I do want to say that that's been very much appreciated by everybody in administration, and I hopefully the families, understand and appreciate what the staff at the schools have been doing to keep the lights on and keep their kids in school as much as possible.
All right. Are you ready to jump into the budget presentation, Mark?
Yes, I am. So this will be the part, if anybody comes in late, I won't see the waiting room. So
I've got it.
okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so I'm going to walk through. I'm going to walk through the high points of what we're seeing in the budget this year and talk about the tax impact on the three communities. Why doesn't this work? Okay, so significant budget to budget changes, and we always report on these things on looking at what was budgeted in this case FY21 and now what we're budgeting in FY22. So the significant changes, teacher salary increases were estimated because we had not resolved our negotiations with the teachers. We are in the final stages of that settlement right now, and we'll be announcing that pretty soon. And we've got a couple T's to cross and I's to dot, but that's finally coming to completion. The settlement is not going to negatively impact the budget in any significant way. We did settle with the support staff earlier, and so that the actual settlement for FY22 is reflected in the budget. We continue to see health insurance premium increases across the statewide VHI system that provides health insurance for all the teachers and education professionals in the state. This year was the first time in a while it's not been a double-digit increase, but 9.2% is significant. However they managed to do it, it's been a long time since we've seen an increase in the dental insurance costs, so that's always nice. So despite all of that, the total budgeted expenditures for this year decreased by $34,395, and that's due to some other reductions in the budget that I'll show you in another slide or two. At the same time, total education spending increased, but that's a result of a loss of revenues that are used that we had last year that are not available this year. The local revenue is down $150,000 in the FY21 budget. There was $150,000 surplus carry forward that was used to offset spending, and that carry forward is not available for FY22. There's no surplus. This Cal Co-op and the other schools in the SU used to benefit for a number of years have been able to draw money from a Medicaid excess grant fund. That fund was exhausted largely because of COVID and the fact that Medicaid revenues are down starting from last March. So there was no Medicaid share this year. Last year that was worth $95,000 in revenue to the district. We have seen an increased state revenue of 194, almost $195,000, and there were other miscellaneous adjustments up and down in there. But the overall net education spending is up because of a reduction, largely in available revenues. In terms of regular education, there are no reductions in current staffing. Some of you will recall that we did reduce some staff last year. We did not make any additional reductions this year. There was some discussion for a couple of successive board meetings about the pros and cons of doing that, and ultimately the administration and board agreed that coming out of the pandemic, going back to what we hope is going to be full instruction in the fall with students who have missed some amount of instruction over the past, since March of last year. We don't know, we won't know until we really get into it, how much extra work we're going to have to put into catching students up. But we are working on what the state's called an education recovery plan. We have a different name for it. That will be coming out pretty soon. And there's significant federal grant money that's coming to us to allow us to make investments in the recovery of our students. But the general feeling is that despite, and I'll show you in a couple minutes, despite the fact that the student count is down, we want the full faculty and staff that we have right now on board to work with the kids when they come back. Overall general instruction costs are up, and that's where the salary and healthcare inflation numbers show up in the general instruction costs. Special education, that goes up and down based on student need, and this year, luckily, the projected need for local revenue to support special education is down almost $75,000. So that's a good thing. One of the assessments that comes over from the SU budget, this was discussed at a board meeting when we presented the budget a couple of sessions ago. There's a pretty significant increase in that assessment that was questioned, and the reason for that is that there are two employees at Barnett School that used to be special ed support persons, paraprofessionals. All of the special ed employees, teachers and paraprofessionals are employed by the supervisory union. And if you're employed by the supervisory union is a member of the Vermont Municipal Employees Retirement System. So they're eligible to be a member of that retirement fund. If we had transferred those two employees are not special education employees. If we had transferred them back to the local budget, they would have lost their contributions to VEMRs. And so I made a decision to leave them in the SU budget. And there is an item on the agenda for Monday's board meeting to discuss that particular issue. And I don't want to get into it here, but it's on the agenda for Monday. So the bottom line on that is it looked like there was a big jump in, the assessment for the superintendent's office, but it's not money that's going to me or to any of my staff that fall under that object code. The board for the last couple of years has intended to transfer $75,000 into capital reserve. That's out of the budget this year because we're not anticipating a surplus to fund that. So that shows up as a loss of revenue. In terms of extracurricular and after-school programs, the summer program for this year is being sponsored at the SU level for all 7 schools in the SU, and it's being paid for out of federal grants. So there's nothing in the budget for FY22 related to summer programs. We anticipate that we'll probably be paying for the summer program next year in the same manner. We'll run an SU-wide program and fund it with federal grants. The after-school programs for the schools had been in the budget for past years. It was taken out of the budget but that doesn't mean we're not going to have after school programs. We're planning after school, or we will be planning after school programs that can be funded out of federal grants. So there's a grant stream called ESSER that's one of the allowable uses is after school and summer programs. So that's how we're going to pay for that. So there will be programs. It's just not going to show up in the local budget. That helps you with your budgeted expenditures. We did leave the money in the budget for the Hubbard Outdoors Center trip, and this year's 7th graders didn't get to go because of COVID, and so we put enough money in the budget so that hopefully the conditions are going to allow kids to go this fall, and we'll send the 7th graders and the 8th graders who missed out on their opportunity this past fall. I don't know how many people realize this, but the district actually funds a big chunk of money, or puts a big chunk of money into food service. So it's paid for, it's operated out of the SU, and it's paid for at the SU level. And then we there's a food service, a separate food service fund, and then the SU, and then the district transfers money to pay any deficit. In this budget, we're projecting almost $146,000 that's needed to cover those costs. I put this in here specifically because there's been some action in the legislature. The Senate has been promoting a bill that would require all schools to feed all of their students breakfast and lunch, regardless of family need. And the bill was set aside and then taken back up again. I don't know if it's come out of the Senate and reached the House yet, and I don't know what its fate is in the House. But I just wanted to mention that, we do have families who have the means to pay for school breakfast and lunch. Under that Senate proposal, there's no funding. There's no parent funding mechanism. They just said, well, then the schools will make up the difference between what the feds reimburse and what they actually spend. So keeping an eye on this, because this number, if that bill goes through as it was proposed originally, this number is going to get bigger on a year-to-year basis. And then the last thing in here is tuition for your students grades 9 through 12. You have high school choice for all 3 schools. $3,626,689 is the chunk that's budgeted to pay for your grade 9 through 12 students next year. That amount increased by about $80,000 from last year's budgeted amount, and that's a reflection of a combination of tuition increases at the two main schools at Linden Institute and St. John's Very Academy, and some fluctuation in the student numbers overall. They go up and down from year to year as classes graduate out of the high school, and then classes come up from 8th grade. So that's a pretty big chunk of money that's paid right off the top out to these other schools. There are a few other schools that students in Barnet, Walden, and Waterford choose to go to high school, and we pay tuition in those schools too. But the bulk of this money goes to St. John's Very Academy and Linden Institute. Excuse me. So this is kind of visually a way to look at where the money goes. You have an $11,843,538 budget. Roughly 44% of that goes for salaries and wages. 30% of that is outgoing tuition. 17% are the assessments back from the SU for services provided by the SU. Special education costs run through the SU and then are billed back. The unreimbursed share is billed back to the district. And then local operating costs is the smallest chunk of this. But that's money to, heat the building, turn the lights on, plow the driveways, maintenance around the building and things like that. it's another way of looking at your expenditures. Salaries and wages is the biggest chunk here. Other services, professional services, your special education assessment is what makes up the majority of the professional services. So that's your special education costs that are not reimbursed by the special education reimbursement formula. And what you get charged at the local budget level is just that unreimbursed share. So all of the special education revenues come into the SU. All of the bills are paid out of the SU, and by bills I mean your employee costs and things like that. And then we go back to the state and ask to be reimbursed for certain percentages of that. And then the difference, which runs about 50% of the cost, about 44% of the cost generally, are the responsibility of the local district. So that's what gets assessed back to you and what shows up in your budget. Oops. Sorry, I have trouble with this. All right. So here's your enrollment picture, and this is the current year enrollment picture, not next year. It's not a projection. It shows the student counts for the grades at each of the schools. And what I did on this was highlighted where we have multi-age or multi-grade configurations. Walden, as you'll see, has 3 of those. They have their 1st and 2nd grade in a single classroom. They have their 4th and 5th grade in a single classroom, and their 6th and 7th grade in a single classroom. Waterford has grades 1, 2, and 3 that are combined together in a primary grade model, and those students are split across 2 classrooms. Barnet this year, in previous years, had because of the size of the classes, the small size of some classes, had run some multi-age classrooms in the past. They did not do that this year, but what they did do, because they had a very large kindergarten class, was take, through assessment, identified the 3 top performing students in kindergarten, and these are students who were already reading at like a 1st and 2nd grade level, and they put them in the 1st grade classroom with, obviously discussion and permission agreement by the parents, so to get the numbers a little more balanced out. Talking with Louisa about classroom configurations, I know that she is looking at the possibility of doing some multi-age or multi-grade configurations next year, but she's not ready to, announce those configurations. She's looking at numbers and staffing and things like that. The other question that always gets asked is about the staff to student ratios. It's in Barnet, and this is only professional staff that's calculated in this. The support staff levels are pretty common across the 3 schools, or at least across Barnet and Waterford. So the ratio in Barnet is 5.6 students to one professional staff, and Walden is 3.88 to 1, and in Waterford it's 5.8 to 1. Walden, even though that ratio looks like a really low number, you notice that they're running 3 multi-grade, multi-age configurations as it is. And some of the professional staffing, it's not just classroom teachers, it includes specialists, special educators, counselors, and things like that. And the numbers of those people depends very much on the different needs of the different schools. So it's a little difficult to just compare straight numbers. It's a little unfair without knowing all the underlying, needs in the, in each of the individual schools. So factors affecting the tax rate. Education spending, as I said, even though our budgeted expenditures, what we said we're going to spend for salaries and things like that, are down, the education spending overall is up because of that revenue loss that I went over earlier. And when your education spending goes up, that puts upward pressure on your tax rates. The equalized pupil count is down significantly by 24, a little over 24 students. That's largely or, well, it's largely a reflection of the fact that we had a number of families exit the school this year and go to a homeschooling model because of the pandemic. And there's something, you know, that almost accounts entirely for that drop of pupils. And we are looking forward anxiously to seeing, you know, hoping that most of those kids are going to return to school next year, so that when we're sitting here and looking at the FY23 budget, we're seeing more students in the school and more equalized pupils. And the basic idea here is the more equalized pupils you have in school, that's a denominator on calculating your tax rate. So the larger that number, the smaller the tax rate. Right now, the fact that we dropped 24 students this and the equalized pupils projection for FY22 is based on the current year enrollment. So that's always running 1 year behind. So, so we're penalized in a sense on next year's spending because we don't have the students this year. We're looking for that number to come back up significantly next year. The biggest influence on tax rates in Barnet, Walden, and Waterford this year is that all three of your communities saw noticeable to significant drops in your common level of appraisal. And I'll show you those numbers when I get into the tax impacts tables. But the common level of appraisal is a calculation that the state does to try to level out the tax rates, so that if your community's property is appraised at a certain level, but it's selling at a higher rate than what it's appraised for, then the appraised values that the tax rates are based on are not actually reflecting a fair share at a grand list level. And so when properties continue to sell above their appraised value, the state ratchets down the common level of appraisal. We'll see the numbers here in the next series of slides, but some of the drops are pretty significant this year. What you want to see is on a year-to-year basis is the common level of appraisal at least staying somewhat flat, and then in communities when they complete their appraisals, you expect to see that number go back up around the 100% point. But all three communities are down right now. But there's a safety valve of a sort built into this budget, because Caledonia Cooperative, as a merged district, is in the last year of its merger tax rate incentives. Okay, so you started off, I think you either started at 8 or 6 cents. I don't know where you started because it depended on what year you merged. But this year, because of the merger, we get to automatically take 2 cents off of any tax reduction right off the top. The other thing that is helping this year is that tax rate increases are limited to no more than 5% year to year. So no matter how much the tax rate might naturally go up because of things like the common level of appraisal changing and going downwards, or equalized people going downward, there's a cap in there that it can't increase by more than 5%. And I just realized I left one other factor out of this, and that's the yield rate, which was initially set at a lower level for FY22 back in December, and but the legislature didn't like that number, and so they've actually raised it above last year's level. And I didn't reflect it on this slide, but you'll see it on the tax impact slides. Lynette, I don't know if you want me to pause and entertain any questions at this point, or just keep plugging away. Keep going? Okay. All right, so the thing is that this budget and these changes in the budget impact each of the towns differently, and that's largely because you have different common levels of appraisal. In Barnett, so the education spending for FY22 is the same for all three towns. The equalized pupil count is the same for all three towns. The yield rate is the same for all three towns, but the CLA is different. Barnett saw a reduction. Barnett's CLA had been above 100%, which means that for last year, which means that the property in Barnett, when they set it in December of 2019, property was actually selling for less than its appraised value. So the yield rate went up above 100%. This year, it's back down. 99.59 is kind of in the normal range, but it's almost 3 points down from last year's rate, and so that had puts upward pressure on your tax rate. And then the yield rate, because the yield rate last year was at 10,998 and is set for this year at 11,385, that takes some pressure off the tax rates. So let me just kind of read down this last column on the right. Because of changes in education spending, as I said, is largely due to revenue losses, the effect on Barnett is 3.7 cent increase of the tax rate. The equalized pupil count, the loss of the 24 equalized pupil adds 9.1 cents to the Barnett tax rate. That is the biggest hit, well, almost the biggest hit. It's a significant hit to everybody's tax rate. The CLA dropping from 103.85 down to 99.59 added 9.4 cents to the tax rate in Barnett. Thankfully, here comes the yield rate, which took some 7.5 cents off of that. So as you continue down, so when the rates was actually calculated, the increase in the local tax rate for Barnett would have been more than a 5% increase, so it got capped. And it got capped at that 5% increase level. So the impact overall on the tax rate in Barnett is a 14.8 cent increase year to year. Okay, same basics for Walden. The education spending, the equalized pupils, same as for Barnett, same as for Waterford, as you're going to see. The common level of appraisal in Walden went from 104.94 down to 96.72. So that's a pretty, what is that, 8 percentage points? That's a big decrease in the CLA, which says that there's been, in the period that they use to measure property sales to calculate the yield rate, that tells me that properties have been selling significant, I shouldn't say significantly. I don't know what the weighting factor is, but well above what their appraised values are in Walden. That change in the CLA alone is responsible for 13.5 cents of the tax rate increase in Walden. I guess, what I want to say about these things, and I should have said it when I was talking about Barnett, we don't have any control, we being the administration and the board, we don't have any control over the CLA rates in the town. Those are calculated and determined by the state, and we don't have any control over that. We don't have any control over equalized pupils in the sense that we can't go out and recruit students to come to school and increase the enrollment in any of the schools. We just have to accept what the enrollment is. So those are two factors that have a big impact. It's almost the entire impact, the tax increase impact for Walden is in those two numbers. The yield rate takes 5.4 cents off of Walden's tax rate, and then the 5% cap is in place. But the tax rate year to year in Walden is an increase of 20.3 cents, and it's different because some of the factors that are used to calculate that are different. Waterford, I've explained the ups and downs of these things. the net impact of the changes to Waterford end up totaling to an 11.4-cent tax increase for all the reasons. The yield rate went down, not as dramatically as it did in Walden, not quite as much as it did in Barnet, but it went in the wrong direction. And, you know, I mean, it's the numbers that are outside of our control, excuse me, are simply outside of our control. And I'm not saying that, you know, that doesn't mean that I think that that this is a good message on the tax rates. These are significant increases for all three communities. The odd thing, if that's the right word, about all of this is that because all three communities right now are protected by the 5% cap, there's still room within this. We could make reductions. We could make reductions in spending and still not see a significant reduction in the property tax rates in any of the three communities. When we the last time when we met as a board, and when the night that the board approved the budget, and my finance director was on the meeting with us, and he had the live spreadsheet up on the screen, and we started making what if changes to the budget. And, you know, like what if we reduced spending 200,000, 400,000? I think we went all the way up to 700,000. And even with reductions at that level, we were not seeing significant tax rate decreases. They went down pretty well in Walden, in Waterford and Barnet, but I think, and Lynette will remember this, I think, and correct me if I'm forgetting this, but even with a $700,000 reduction in expenditures, Walden's tax rate only went down about 4 or 5 cents. Am I remembering that?
I think we only went up to, I think 400 or 500, but yes, it was a minimal change.
It was a very minimal effect for that much of a reduction in spending. And the reason I bring that up is that in the budget, the way that it's configured, when you start trying to get large cuts in the budget in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, you're talking about reducing staff. You can't do it by cutting the supply budget. You can't do it by cutting out field trips. You're talking literally about cutting teachers and support staff in the school. You know, when we do these kinds of what if exercises with budgets, we use kind of a rough rule of thumb that salary and benefits in general, and this is just an average, because some teachers cost more and some teachers cost less. But for teachers, we say roughly total salary and benefits, we use an $80,000 rule of thumb. So if you were going to cut, you know, if you wanted to cut $500,000 out of this budget, you're talking about 6 or 7 teachers, you know, and it's just, you know, 6 teachers, 6.5 teachers, something like that. And when you start talking about it in that context and start thinking about where are those staffing reductions going to come from, and what is the impact of significant staffing reductions like that going to be on the ability of the 3 schools to provide education to their students, it seemed, my sense from the board discussion is it quickly became apparent that it didn't make sense to anybody to do that. So we talked about making changes. We talked about cutting more money out of the budget. Significant cuts to this budget would come at the cost of laying off teachers and support staff, and we just don't think this is a year to do that coming out of the pandemic. So that's the budget overview. That's the message on the tax rates. There's some links here if you want information on, you know, education financing, if you want to look up tax rates, if you're curious and want to dig into how the state calculates CLA, you can get that from the tax department. So there's a lot of information, as most people know, online, you know, formulas and things like that. Pretty complicated process. But it's something that you can understand if you take the time to wrap your head around it. Okay, that's the end of this presentation. Questions?
All right, one thing that I do need to take care of is I let 2 people in during your presentation, Mark, that we need some names for. One shows up as a phone number 802-748-5758. If you could unmute yourself and let us know who you are so we can fix that. And the other one was a Galaxy S9 Plus.
That's probably me, Kylie Willie.
Okay, let me fix you. Thank you, Kylie.
Yes, the 5758 was Lawrence.
Is that a first name or a last name?
Last name, Thomas Lawrence.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Oops, I can't type. Okay. I do see a hand up on that.
All right, I don't see a hand up.
Oh, I see. Well, I see Marcia Martell's got her hand up, and then James raised his hand.
I see them now. I do. Sorry.
Well, I just had a few questions here. Are you going to be continuing the food service all summer like you did last year?
Yeah, we are because we are going to be operating food service to support our summer school programs. So we're going to be offering meals. I don't have the details worked out yet. Whatever we're going to have to figure out. We're not going to operate 7 kitchens this year. We're going to operate 3 or 4 kitchens because we're at the summer school sites, and we've got to figure out, the logistics of that. But the intent is to continue to offer meals to families if they want meals over the summer.
And that's by choice, or you just automatically do it?
Well, that's a good question. I think, from a philosophical perspective, we would want to do that, but I think that we are, from a legal perspective, since we are going to offer summer programs, we're required to do it. So I guess it depends on, if you want, we're either doing it because, we're nice, or we're doing it because we have to, depending on how you want to look at it. But, the participation rate last summer was not as high as we anticipated, but we did reach families who had, who had real food insecurities, and, that's probably, and I don't have the figures in front of me, the percentages of participation, but if we're reaching those families, we're reaching the right families, and we're going to figure out how to do it again this year.
Well, I totally agree with you there. I do. I mean, what's the, I guess from what I saw when I got my ballot, that the education spending is $19,432 per equalized pupil.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's $2,100 more than the state average.
It's above the excess spending threshold, but because of the 5% tax rate cap, it doesn't have any impact on the tax rate. The cap.
All right, so we don't get penalized because we're above it.
Well, technically, no. I mean, in one sense, you do, because it's in the calculation. But if the cap wasn't there, I don't even want to guess what the tax rates would be. And these merger incentives are gone after FY22. So that's going to be a cross for the communities to bear next year to figure out how we're going to fund the schools for FY23.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. And I know that the bill has not come over to the House from the Senate on the meals.
Okay.
But I know the last that I was reading up on it and everything, they were saying give breakfast only to everybody. So it'll be interesting when it does come over to the House to see what we're told when it gets over there.
Yeah, well, I hadn't heard that change. The last I heard was, it had been set aside and then picked back up again, and that was a week ago or last Friday. that the Senate picked it up again, and you know, I don't know what they're going to end up with. The problem is that, you know, the unfunded mandate, so to speak, it was calculated at 25 to $40 million a year that would fall on the local districts to fund, which means that that's 25 to $40 million a year coming out of the ed fund. And the ed fund, the only reason there's money in the ed fund is that the property taxes pay for it. So
Exactly.
it's one way or the other, it's a burden on the communities, and you know, communities like Walden, Barnet, and Waterford, because they're part of a unified district. Cabot, which is another one of my districts, that's a real concern for them, because they're always dancing around the edge of that excess spending threshold. There was some other talk about maybe taking it off the top of the ed fund so that it wouldn't, the idea being it wouldn't hit the local taxpayers, except it does, because it would be a 3 to 4 cent increase in the state. They would make it up some other way. They would adjust, you know, the base rate or something like that. So the towns are going to pay, the communities are going to pay one way or the other if it's funded out of the ed fund. The only other way to do it would be to find another revenue stream, and I don't have to tell you, Marcia, that that's
No, you don't have to tell me that.
you know, that's not a subject that any, you know, that the governor doesn't entertain increases in taxes in other places. So I don't know. We're
Well,
just kind of sitting back and holding our breath.
And I agree with you, and I appreciate what you've done. And I have one last question, and this is for the principals. How are the kids doing?
Well, I can speak for Waterford. I think we're all really grateful that we get to see about 92% of them 5 days a week. They are, if anything, resilient and really just working hard. And I feel like the fact that we can see so many of them every day has had a tremendous impact on their well-being.
Thank you for sharing that, because I was over to your school and we honored one of your teachers, and the kids, I mean, they amazed me. They were outdoors running around with their masks on, and it was just, you know, nice to see them out and active, and I'm glad that they, you know, are doing good. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I don't, Lynette James has his hand up as well.
Go ahead, James.
Marcia just asked that, and I do have the two girls at Waterford, and yeah, it's very good, and that goes to credit, of course, to the teachers and the staff. But it's been very good, and he's right. The kids are resilient, but I don't think they'd be so resilient without as much, you know, support from the teachers and the staff, and as much as everybody's been through this year. I think everybody's doing an excellent job at Waterford, and I'm sure at the other two schools. And I just saw Mary M put in the chat box about that she did not get her.
Yeah, is that so? The ballots were just being mailed out. Has anybody received ballots yet?
Yeah,
we did in
some-
Barnet.
yeah.
Okay,
And I guess
I thought, I don't know.
I was alerted by somebody who lives on one of the roads that intersects with Concord. And I know there's 3 roads out there, but Concord, Barnet shares a couple roads, and St. Johnsbury. So I don't know if it's that, because they have a different, I have a St. Johnsbury zip code. I don't know if that's what's affecting it, but I am aware of at least 3 residents who have not received their ballots.
This is Mary M. Waterford has at least 3, possibly 4 different zip codes. In the past, I've always received, I'm on one of them. I get my mail out of Concord. But in the past, we've always received it at the same time as everybody else. I'm just concerned because we also didn't get any kind of postcard or anything notifying us of this meeting. And I don't know how many other people have been affected. Barnet has multiple zip codes, and Walden does also. You know, if the mailings did not go out to every zip code in all 3 towns, I don't know what we do.
So I'm gonna look into this tomorrow, obviously, but the mailing list that we get from the town clerks is supposed to be the mailing list of all active registered voters in their town. And if the address, and I would assume that that the address, that they maintain good address information, but that's
Yeah.
the only information that we have.
And if that is what you got, then that should be good, because we have gotten ballots before.
Yeah, the only other thing I was going to say, Mary, and this is just speculation, but because there's different post offices involved.
Yes.
I don't know about your experience, but I think the post office is not what the post office used to be. Postal Service is not what it used to be.
This has been an ongoing problem for years. It's not the post office. It's been an ongoing problem for years.
But I do see that Kyle, who lives in Walden and gets his through Cabot, got his ballot, and Jessica Roy, who lives in Barnet and has a Groton mailing address, also received hers. So it may just be a delay, but it is something for everyone to be aware of. We need to be more proactive in terms of getting these things mailed out earlier. I guess that's my only suggestion for it.
Okay, well, there's some there's a built-in timeline in terms of you can't do the ballots until you have a warning approved, and you can't approve a warning until you have to be within 45 days of the actual election date. And so there's a daisy chain of dates. It's not like we could have mailed ballots in February. And so but I'll look into this tomorrow and see if I can find out any information. Jan, which zip code do you get your mail from?
I'm at the PO box in Lower Waterford. I did receive mine, but I know in the past, the families that have not gotten them in Waterford have had issues in the past.
Okay, well, if you know who any of them are, and you want to email me names, I'll try to look in and see what they have. I don't know if I can look at the mailing list. I might be able to. I'll see where, what's going on with that. But
where is the town team? Is it open?
James, did you have any other questions?
I did. You sent the email out, Lynette, about all of the bills that have passed, the money that's going to be released through the COVID relief, all the COVID relief bills, as many as there were. And I guess my question is going forward, because as best as I could read and I watched the video, the money is going to be dispersed through 2024. And I guess going forward with budgets and whatnot, I did understand quite a bit of the money is, it's used for, direct purposes. But are we looking at a positive outcome from this, being able to use a large amount of that money for the school, I don't mean to offset budgets, but going forward here, how we're going to be able to use that money?
I'll answer that if you want, Lynette. So right now we're looking at, there've been 4 disbursements of money from the federal government related to COVID. The Coronavirus Relief Fund ran from March or early April until the end of December, and that was a chunk of money. That was I think Vermont got about $24 million roughly out of that, and that was distributed to in pieces to schools. So that was covered expenses in FY20, the end of FY20 and the beginning of FY21. And then there have been 3 successive mills that have generated funds that are called ESSER, E-S-S-E-R. And sometimes I can remember what that acronym is, and sometimes I can. And right now is the time that I can't. But so there's ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. Each of those has been a progressively larger amount of money each time. So for right now, the money that we received under ESSER 1 was about $420,000, and that's being used to cover some of the expenses, COVID-related expenses that we've incurred from January 1 forward, plus at least partially funding summer school this year. ESSER 2 money is quite a bit more. That is intended for educational recovery, and ESSER 3 is a big chunk of money. And they have successive years of expiration. So we're gonna spend all the ESSER 1 money before we spend any of the ESSER 2 money, and the ESSER 2 before we spend all the ESSER 3, but we're gonna spend every nickel that we get. It's intended for educational recovery. So some things that we're looking at doing, as I already mentioned, funding the after-school programs for a year or two at least, funding this year's summer program and next year's summer program, doing additional professional development for teachers around recovery. We'll be looking at potentially hiring some short-term additional interventionists to go into schools to work on, once we get through the needs analysis process, identifying if we see large gaps or significant gaps at grade levels or a particular skill level. We'll look at bringing somebody in on, for a year or two, using some of that money. A lot of different things that we can do for it. All kinds of good things for kids. Not much in it in terms of helping the taxpayers, with the local tax rate, unfortunately.
Thank you, Mark.
That ESSER money, I agree with Mark, it can be spent through 2024. And like you said, it can't be used to ease your burden of your budgets. It's especially earmarked for everything. But at least we're going to be given some in our districts to help, like you say, help out with different things. But it is for specific things and not your budgets.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but the total for those three ESSER funds for our SU is somewhere in the neighborhood of $12 million. So that's a significant amount of money that we will have available to spend on educational recovery. There's also one of the allowable uses is in a category that they call continuing operations, which is has to do with things like, I'll give you an example. There's some kitchen equipment issues at Barnett, and we're probably going to direct some ESSER money towards repairing or replacing some kitchen equipment. I don't know, I'm not sure which it is, but that's an example of continuing operations. In order to keep the school running, you have to have an operating school kitchen. So it's things like that otherwise we would be scrambling around looking for food service equipment grants and things of that nature. That's a pot of money that we can direct for things like that. We're going to spend some of that money on, excuse me, more tents and things like that for supporting outdoor instruction at some of the schools that still need to do some work around that. Some of that money could be used in theory on some maintenance or construction work at the schools. It can't be used for projects that have already been funded or started, so it's not something that we can tap into for the 3 construction projects at Walden, Waterford, and Barnett that you've already funded. But as additional things come up, especially as it relates to things like ventilation and operation of our buildings, that's an allowable use. It's going to be a little tricky with the ESSER money around using it for construction because it's federal money and it falls under, we got some extra rules for how we spend it. There's something called the Davis-Bacon Act, which says that sets what the hourly rates are for employees at a federal level. And so we have to hire contractors that are paying federal rates, which means that the construction projects that are funded with those grants will cost more money overall. And there's a set of hoops that we're going to have to jump through to get that approved through the agency. But, you know, it's, you know, it costs the federal government $10 to give away $1. So, and that's just right, Marcia, you know that. You know, it's they make you work for it. I mean, it's nice to have the money, and I'm not complaining, but they make you work for it. So.
And the other thing is they don't want you to start, you know, something new that you'll have to pay further down the road. They want you to, because that would just hurt the taxpayers later. But you're right. It's very detailed as what you can use it for. Yeah. But if you know, when they send you the regulations, just use it to the best advantage you can.
Oh yeah, we're already working on figuring out how we're going to divvy that up.
Or school tomorrow? Yes.
All right. Do we have any other questions? I don't see anything in the chat.
Somebody's going to take you.
Don't see anyone's hands up right now. All right. Well, thank you very much, Mark.
Okay, you're welcome. Come back on the 28th. We're doing it again.
Absolutely. We'll come back on the 28th.
And when you get your budget, we did insert, or I'm sorry, your ballot. We did insert a page in with the ballot mailing with the announcements of these meetings. So I thought that the ballots were going to get to you before tonight's meeting, and obviously there's some problems with a few of the deliveries. I will see what I can find out about that in general terms, and maybe it's specific zip codes, meaning specific post offices that are a little bit behind. I don't know, but I'll see what I can find out about that.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, everyone, you have a lovely evening. Enjoy tomorrow's sunshine if you can. It's going to be a gorgeous one, I think, our faux spring. And if there aren't any objections, I will adjourn this meeting at 7:12.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice to see everybody.
Good night.